Hey guys, and welcome back to another Megabasing 101 episode with Zuri and Mojo.
Hello.
Greetings.
And today we are covering on-site smelting, or smelting strategies kind of as a whole. So we've set up a setup here, and we're on a SpaceX map that Colonel Woe was doing, but we're on here because there's also a few examples of how you should avoid doing on-site smelting if you choose to go this route to begin with. And do we want to start with this example or map view over to the one up top that is a bad example of what you should do?
How about we start with a map view?
All right, so if we go all the way up to Iron Boost, now it's not running fully, but even so, this is a pretty good example of a way that you want to avoid doing your on-site smelting for multiple reasons, which I'll let Zuri and Mojo point out if you guys would like.
Well, I was actually playing on this map. The first thing that I point out is that iron patch next to the smelting was quite a lot bigger at one point in time.
Oh, I imagine, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And you may also notice that there's a train delivering more iron ore to it.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I particularly don't like about the on-site smelting, more than apart from the bot travel, is that it becomes so difficult to pick it up and move it that you start delivering ore from nearby patches by direct train, and then you start questioning why he was doing it in the first place.
At that point, it's just a smelter outpost.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And as you said, the bot travel, I'm mousing over the network here. This is the other issue with on-site smelting. Even the good example of a very good way to do it, which we have down here. We'll go back to the top one, but just to show the bot network, that even this one is quite a large bot network. Which, I mean, optimization 101 pretty much in Factorio is you want to avoid huge bot networks. And on a megabase scale, having these massive bot networks is not really a good thing.
Yeah, I'm betting a common mistake when you're building an outpost for smelting at the mine is a lot of people will probably try to build the smelter to just perfectly eat what the miners are producing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually a really bad thing to do because the patch is only going to get smaller over time. So a good place to aim for is about half to about a third of what the patch can produce. And that might go up a little initially if you boost your research with mining productivity. But after that, you're only going to end up, increasing bot travel and wastage.
Yeah, and again, just quickly looking at the top one, that's a very good example of what you just said, right? Is this smelter was built to pretty much consume the entire patch, I'd imagine, when the patch was full.
Yeah, that's right.
Now you can see this patch is tiny, and even with speed modules, I mean, the requesters are pretty much full, but we were looking at earlier, and even so, this patch was only supporting like maybe half of this smelter, and that's with speed modules in them, and that's just the entire rest of the smelter. All these beacons, all these furnaces, taking power, producing pollution. Well, they don't produce pollution when they're off, but they're taking power. Yeah, it's there. It's making the bot network bigger because it's obviously there and extending the network. And yeah, just to reinforce what Zuri said, this is you want to build it quite a bit smaller than what your patch can actually support, even when you initially build it.
And don't forget, you can put productivity modules in miners.
That's a very good point as well.
Yeah, you can make it last about 30% longer if you just load them all up with productivity modules. It'll slow it down quite a bit, but it'll last quite a bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's sort of been forgotten since mining productivity research became a thing, but it's still there.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they stack together, actually. I might have to science that sometime.
No, I'm pretty sure they do.
Yeah, they do.
So then, kind of, again, I mean, looking at the bot networks, this one we've made pretty much as tight as possible, which, again, is what you want to try to do. And even so, the network is still a lot bigger than what I would consider ideal. But a few things that Madzuri has done here with the smarts, maybe if you want to cover this, is actually it's really quite clever. These smarts that make this more of a viable option, the on-site smelting, and fix some of the problems that you would encounter with it.
Yeah, we covered this in the workshop video. But basically, what I did is I summed together the two iron signals for iron plate and iron ore and set it for the amount for one train load, assuming you have a 5 cargo wagons. And then,
Right.
so if there's enough ore and ore plates, summed together to fill up an entire train, it shuts off all the miners. And this will prevent stuff like the traveling wave of perfect mining that you see and a lot of people generally don't like. I hear a lot of people complaining about that, how the nearest miners will mine out and then the farther boxes will just fill up.
Yeah, and you can actually see that again up at this top example, is these back boxes are completely full and the bots are only grabbing from the first couple.
Yeah, so you can shut down the miners and they'll, I'm not sure if they consume power when you shut them down via a signal, but they don't have what is it called?
They they don't
They don't
take
have a
game
drain.
performance. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have a drain when they're shut off. And I have seen them.
They do go to sleep when they're turned off.
Yeah, they don't have an electric drain and they don't have a CPU drain when they're shut off. So it's very efficient both for power and for your UPS to shut them off via signal.
Yeah, and I think they may have. Well, yeah, I'm not. In general, I think they have a power drain if they're shut off, but maybe not via a signal. Because I'm looking just at the power network. I mean, and there's 4,500 miners taking 140 megawatts, and definitely not all of those are actually on. But when you do it with a signal, it may be different. But either way, it's also, it fixes the uneven mining, like Zuri mentioned. It also means less pollution, which is another issue, I think, with on-site smelting, which, it's just a byproduct, is that there's more pollution at your outpost, which is typically, closer to where the enemies are, if you are playing with enemies. So turning them off like this can be quite helpful because, they're not producing pollution while completely filling up these boxes and stuff, not taking the power constantly.
There's nothing worse than someone putting up one of these right next to the defensive walls next to a big spider nest.
Yeah, that'll cause you some problems.
Oh, I just crunched some numbers for you. Since almost all the miners on the map have 3 speed 3s in them and they consume a lot of power, you only have 604 miners active out of the 4.5K placed.
Okay.
So yeah, they don't consume power when they're on standby.
Okay, they just show in the network though because they're connected.
They're still connected, yeah.
There you go.
Oh,
2.2 kilowatts. Basically nothing.
So now they're at 0. They're actually 0. So yeah, there you go. Perfect. Well, that's a good way to do it. So, I think we could actually, if we want to turn this on, we can bump these requests up a little bit to show there are still some bot travel issues, just because of the size of the network and what the bots are, having to do to transfer the material back and forth. But this is a pretty good way to do it. In this smelter, a quick note: the smelter is larger than it should be. As I mentioned, you want it quite a bit smaller than this, even for this size of patch. This is more than you'd want.
Yeah, cut a third or a half of this off should be just about optimal, I think.
Yep. And I guess, let's see.
Oh, trains.
trains. Yeah.
So, yeah, if you shut off the miners like this, and you get rid of the box buffers, I guess you can say, you don't even have to worry about doing the micromanaging for the trains. It'll just the entire outpost will shut down, and you can do this with or without smelting, by the way. So you don't have to worry about the number of trains you set or the train delay to get there and back. You just let it self shut down. The train arrives, it kicks on, it fills it up, and it'll keep running until the next train arrives, or until it fills up enough for the next train. And the train may or may not get there before it's done. It doesn't really matter. It'll
Yeah.
shut
Or
down like
one
it did
train
now.
load waiting, then that's a bonus.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, another bonus to controlling the miners like this, we were discussing earlier, is the mining productivity. We've mentioned this multiple times before, but mining productivity is much more effective the longer your ore stays in the ground. And with normal mining, all your miners, fill up these boxes, these box buffers, and that's all that ore that will not be affected by future mining productivity levels. Whereas this, shutting it off like this, it's keeping your ore in the ground longer, which, it gives you a bigger effect with the productivity research. Now, a few things. In regards to on-site smelting in general, I would say we were talking earlier that this does have limitations. This can be a decent option for smaller bases. You guys were mentioning a few of the advantages to actually using on-site smelting for kind of smaller bases.
Yeah, it reduces the number of trains that are running around on your network because plate has double the stack size of ore. That means the train carries twice as much. Each train twice as much, so half the number of trains.
Yes,
Less, yeah.
but if unless you have a central base where a single set of unloading stations handles all of the ore, or sorry, the plates coming into the base. Unless you have that, or you need to grow past the point where that's feasible, controlling which trains go to which outposts and to which bases is really, really quite annoying. Which is kind
Yeah,
of
that's
why
the
we
point where it
have,
breaks down.
so that's why we generally advise the central smelting outside the base, so you can send all your ore trains there, and then all your satellite bases can get plates from there.
Right, and your bases that are getting plates with a central smelting system are not. I'm trying to think how to say this. Are not necessarily directly affected when a specific outpost starts running out. Obviously, less ore means less plate, but you can just simply go build another outpost, send trains to your central smelting, and you're good to go. Whereas with a system like this, let's say this was, whatever, all the plates you needed for green circuits. When this particular outpost starts drying up, your green circuits start suffering. And, you can't have another bigger outpost supplement as easily as you could with central smelting because, this outpost is doing circuits. So when this starts drying up, your circuits get less plate, and then you have to go build a whole nother circuit outpost, essentially.
And
Yeah,
a
if you
natural
wanted to-
impulse is to redirect other trains, which is something I've done before in multiplayer games, and then
Yeah.
discover something else just runs out.
A solution to that we've discussed before is to build a distribution center somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and that's horribly actually quite complicated. And if you're going to build a distribution somewhere, you might as well put a smelter there.
Yeah.
You effectively just built a central smelter or a smelting site.
Yeah, except made it even more complicated by having it not be a smelter and be a distribution center. Now, like we said, for smaller bases, I would say this is certainly viable. Even potentially to a farther extent than this, there's even a few places on this map that have like green circuits as well as smelting.
Yeah, this
below
map actually has 2 builds with green circuit production on mining copper and iron, and then smelting them, and then using assembly machines to turn into green circuits.
Yeah, which again can reduce the number of trains, but I'm looking at this one below solar. If you look at the size of this bot network, it's huge compared to kind of like satellite based designs.
You also notice it too gained a train delivering copper because it was easier to deliver copper to it than it was to pick up the entire base and move it.
Yeah, and if you're doing that, then again you might as well just make a central smelter. If you're having to pull ore from other patches to send to the on-site one.
And there's nothing wrong with having a localized smelting at, like, say, a circuit outpost, because that's eventually what it'll turn into. You have a green circuit outpost, and you'll have trains delivering, copper ore and iron ore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, a valid way of doing things. It works just fine. And that's kind of how those things evolve, actually. They start off as a mining outpost that gets turned into a circuit outpost that gets turned into a combined smelting circuit outpost, and you start delivering trains there.
True. Yeah.
Now,
it
should also be noted that for the purposes of this map, the central the offsite, the mining, smelting on site, and the circuits at the mining were completely viable here because it was a time limited map, and it was only to finish the SpaceX chain.
Yeah, that completely throws off a lot of the calculations. If there's a temporal variable that you need to worry about, like how long does it need to last, how long does it need to be there, are you planning on using it after it finishes the ore patch or not?
Yeah,
which that's actually an extremely important point I to mention that we hadn't before, that it depends on your goals, right? If you're doing something like this, like SpaceX or some other thing where you're like, okay, I'm gonna play this for 50 hours and then I'm done. This is a very viable option because you won't run into a lot of the problems that we've mentioned. However, if you're going for a long-term mega base, that's when you start running into problems. When you could easily burn through, 10 patches of each ore type and stuff and have to pick these up and move them that many times and stuff. And then also the scale too, right? I mean, we said this was viable for smaller bases, but I'd say there's potentially a few breaking points. I'd say anything over maybe 1,000 packs a minute at the most is where this starts to break down.
Yeah, I think even 1,000 might be pushing it. Maybe 800. It should also be noted too, I've mentioned this before many times, that the scale of a megabase has increased dramatically over the past year, especially since 15 came out.
Yeah, that is a very good point.
So it went from 1,000, one rocket a minute, 1,000 science a minute went from, what was it? Only 30 to 40,000 iron plate up to over 100,000 iron plate.
Yeah, and I mean at that scale, when you're consuming it that quickly, you'll go through patches pretty quick, and you have to pick them up and move them a lot doing this type of thing. But again, still viable if you want to do it. This is a type of setup we'd suggest. I will throw the miner blueprint thing with all the wires and stuff in the description. And is there anything else you guys would like to cover or mention for this?
I believe I've covered everything that I can think of.
If you got biters, be sure to defend this a lot because this is really expensive.
Yes, it is.
Insanely expensive, and it produces a lot of pollution.
Indeed. Other than that, nope.
All right, well, there you go, guys. Hopefully that gave you a bit of more of a breakdown into our reasoning behind, typically not wanting to do on-site smelting. But if you do want to do it, then hopefully this gave you also a good idea or options for some ways to go about it. But I believe that'll do it. As always, thanks for watching. Leave your thoughts down below, and we will see you next time.
Yeah.
Later.